Hey there everyone, AJ back again for the Mighty Gluestick channel. I make videos about Dungeons & Dragons lore full time and have a huge collection of videos for you to binge watch, and I upload 2 new videos per week with a live stream as well each week. If you like what I do, please consider becoming a member of the channel by clicking the join button below, or becoming a backer on Subscribestar or a patron on Patreon, where you can get access to all of the scripts I write for these vids if you prefer reading what I'm saying. I also have a Discord server with an active community, and of course subscribe to the channel. It was 30 days until Håkon Hardax was finally going to get married. Even by dwarven standards, this was a long time coming, and perhaps it was just his abiding love for all dwarven traditions. Perhaps it was just his wanting to get away from the wedding planning, but on this bitterly cold morning, we were several hours by riding rams from our camp near the Mirar River, at the mouth of the Valley of Kedron, a few days down from Mirabar, and in the morning shadow of the spine of the World Mountains, we'd tethered the rams and taken an oiled sack of fresh goat blood, as well as a little pouch of metal shavings, consisting, I was told, of mostly gold and a little platinum mixed with some silver. Too much trouble to bother smelting down again, as the ingot would be useless. Still, it made me wince when the precious metals were just scattered here and there as we laid our web of baits for what we were hunting. We were not alone on this hunt. A young black lion tribesman was with us. He pointed out the sign of the animal that started us scattering the bait, a series of deep scratches on rocks that made me take a closer look. These were igneous rocks. I shuddered to think what those claws would do to flesh and bone, and was very sceptical as I adjusted my grip on the boar spear I was carrying. With its haft of very strong but lightweight smoky grey duskwood, as strong as iron, but not as strong as that rock. Håkon's sister Kilgisli handed me a flask of mead, and I gladly took a swig from it, as my nerves were always a bit on edge this close to the lurkwood. Even on the other side of the river, I'm always on the lookout for two-faced ettins and trolls, but that's another story. Bait set, we climbed into the branches of the pines and waited. I was one of the pin spears. Kilgisli and her cousin Garlin had long pikes, and Håkon, as this was his hunt, was carrying a large axe, sharp enough to split a hair in half. I was told to wait until the pikes stuck into the beast, then I would shove my spear in the back of its skull as hard as I could, and not let go for the life of me. I didn't ask if this was going to be dangerous. Of course it was going to be seriously dangerous. These were dwarves, and this was what they consider a rite of passage. This was going to be deadly. We sat in those trees for the better part of the day. It was close to midday by the time the sun shone on the area fully, which I was glad for. It was still really cold, and I had not moved as much as a finger for a few hours, and then there it was, sniffing at that line of goat's blood and licking metal shavings off its snout, peering around with those weird eyes. What the dwarves called a gorger, we sages from Candlekeep called the Aurumvorax, the beast that eats gold. About 3 feet long, squat and powerfully built like a large badger with 8 short legs, an elongated weasel-like head with small sharp ears pointed like a lynx cat, and that incredible thick pelt of golden fur. It was magnificent and looked about as wild and feral a creature as I had ever set my eyes on. I was warned that once it knew we were there was no turning back and no scaring this creature off, as it is absolutely fearless, which proved to be completely accurate. As it turns out, Uthgard barbarians are also completely fearless, as our guide leapt from his tree with a screaming shout to Tempest that shocked me so much I actually fell out of my tree. Despite Håkon's claim that I leapt to the warrior's side, I actually landed on my feet out of sheer dumb luck, and my staggers to stay upright only looked like I was running in the same direction. Believe me, I was not being brave, I was being clumsy. No sooner than it saw the barbarian, the Golden Gorger charged right at him. Its snarl was deeper than I was expecting. I could feel it through my feet, and it just threw snow before it with ease. As we discovered, the creature was far heavier than it looks and will just punch right through obstacles in its way. The barbarian was an obstacle in its way. Had he not put his shield armor up in time, he would have been gutted like a knucklehead trout. As it was, the Aurumvorax slammed into him, shredded his shield, and bit his javelin in half before I even got within reach of my spear. I thrust at the side of the beast and barely moved it, but I did feel the spear tip punch through its hide a little. Then it turned on me. Nearly gripping the spear out of my hands, I staggered back. It came forward and then it was on top of me, its jaws clamping on my spear right between my hands. But it couldn't bite right through it, thankfully. It must have been just for a moment because it was off me and I was on my back and then onto my feet, and the two pikes had it in the sides. Håkon and his sister were yelling at me and I just charged in again, my spear tip going right into the beast's mouth, and I drove it down with the entire weight of my body. Next thing I remember, Håkon's axe swung again and again, hacking at its legs, and we were just all hanging on for dear life, blood spraying everywhere until the beast was finally still, and even then we just leaned on our spears and thanked every god that was listening. It was the groans from the barbarian that roused us back to action, but he was remarkably fortunate, only needing some restorative for a nasty flapping wound on his thigh, though in that environment, without our preparations, that wound probably would have killed him eventually. When we did turn our attention back to the Aurumvorax, we found that its death released some of its bile, and the acid was so strong it actually ate away the metal tip of my very strong boar spear and was sizzling away on the crossguard just behind it, which was a shame because I quite liked that weapon. The dwarves got to work on the animal right then and there, grunting and heaving it around. They said it weighed at least 500 pounds, and I believed them. I picked up one of the severed paws, and it was freakishly heavy. The claws were copper-coloured, and its eyes were like silver. Its fur a rich gold, and its long whiskers like brilliant bronze. It's hard to describe how spectacular. The fur was at least 3 inches thick over most of its body, and as I watched the dwarves haul it up off the ground with a block and tackle and gut it and start to skin it, I could see there was not an ounce of fat on that beast. It was solid bone, muscle and sinew, with plenty of old scars that looked pretty serious. Håkon said it looked like a dragon got its jaws around it at some point in the past. I wonder if that dragon lived through that fight. I don't know. I settled down and got the fire going, piling up some rocks, and the dwarves set a pot over it, put the chopped up remains in there, and we all just hacked firewood and fed that flame as fast as we could, making it as hot as we could. Our intention was not to cook and eat the meat, mind you. It would have poisoned all of us, and we were careful not to breathe the steam coming off that pot. Towards the end, Kilgisly started chanting in Dwarvish, and the fire got tremendously hot, some sort of magic. The heat was so intense the black pot shone as white as a lit torch. Even so, it was well into the night before we set off from there and back to the camp. A magnificent pelt, an oiled sack with the creature's brain in it for curing the hide, the teeth and claws wrapped up in some more skins, as well as they'd be made into a necklace and some fine daggers for the wedding. And that magnificent golden furred coat, a gift for Håkon's bride. A fine gift, I might add, as the fur like that can sell for 15 to 20,000 gold coins. After we got back to Mirabar, I added my notes in my journal and sent a raven back to Candlekeep, taking a long hot bath before the wedding, and Håkon's outrageous telling of our hunting story. Being the honourable dwarf that he is, my place at the feasting table was set with a metal plate and cutlery of solid gold made from what we got from the meat and bone that got smelted on that fire. Even that gold plate engraved with a picture of the beast and with me with my spear, which I still have in my quarters in Candlekeep, was just a fraction of the 200 pounds of gold the beast had in its body. Further studies since then have revealed that the Aurumvorax has highly corrosive saliva as well as potent bile. And not only that, its entire body is toxic. It's immune to all forms of toxin. Its body is so dense and strong that spring steel traps simply don't work, and it can dig, rip and melt its way out of most other forms of confinement. The beast will shrug off blows from warhammers thanks to their thick coat and dense flesh. They have a very powerful lockjaw bite, which I've seen firsthand, which is their first line of attack, with those wicked claws digging in and disemboweling. Aurumvorax release the bite after either they are dead or their victim is dead, or they're ripped away from the victim in the middle of combat. They are not the most intelligent beasts, but they do know the difference between a creature's limbs and a manufactured weapon, so they release their grip on those in favour of biting into meat and bone. Their habitat is cool alpine forests and foothills. They have an uncanny sense for where to find the precious ore they consume, and opportunistically eat most medium or large game in an area as well. They are carnivores who seem to need to eat precious metals to survive. Of course, This habitat is also the preferred domain of the dwarves, so the dwarves consider the Aurumvorax to be a dreadful pest, gnawing away the gold coatings on their precious monuments and digging into their lucrative gold mines, eating out the rich veins in the ore and reducing their careful constructions to unstable rubble. They've discovered over time that the Aurumvorax can't be smoked out of a mine shaft either. The creatures are extremely resistant to fire and heat, and while smoke will irritate them, it just won't kill them. You can encounter them outside wandering around any time, apart from the months of deep winter when the beasts hibernate in their deep rocky burrows, or they simply bury themselves completely with just a patch of fur and skin exposed, which I'm told is how they get their oxygen to breathe when in deep hibernation. So don't rush to dig your pickaxe into every little twinkle of gold you see on the ground, not in deep winter anyway. They are usually solitary animals. They come together to mate once every 8 or 9 years for about a month. When the male leaves, the female gestates for 6 months and gives birth to a litter of a dozen kittens, which are born hairless and sightless for the first 2 weeks. Most of the kittens will die from starvation due to lack of enough gold to eat. The mother may also eat some of her own offspring if she has been starved of gold in her diet as well, which is quite common, though she will seek to fill her burrow with gold and platinum rich ore before the birth if she is able. That's when dragons have to safeguard their hoards well. There are few things as tenacious and greedy as a pregnant Aurumvorax, even by dragon standards. The kittens that survive will stay with the mother for up to 6 years before they're fully grown adults, so this can be as short as a couple of years in an environment with an abundant source of gold. They do need to eat at least the gold once per week in order to stay healthy, and platinum is super nutritious to them apparently, extending their survivable gap to 3 weeks between metallic meals. They tend not to eat every really small animal that's in their area. They don't bother with fleet-footed creatures that are just passing through their domain. They are very aggressive towards large animals and any humanoids in their territory though. There is a subspecies of the Golden Gorger, I've been told, in Cormanthor. There is a breed that can be found in the Rimwood and Midwood areas of the Cormanthor forest. They've been there for close to 500 years, originally transported with great difficulty, I imagine, by some brave and foolish treasure hunters from the Vast. So perhaps they captured a few in the Troll Mountains. In any event, they have become a unique breed thanks to their isolation and adaptation to a very gold-poor diet. Maybe the treasure hunters did something to them, we'll never know for sure, since those poor souls ended up eaten by the Aurumvorax they tried to tame like truffle pigs. Although these Aurumvorax thrived in the plains of the Rimwood east of the River Liss, making many holes in the ground in that area, which you should be careful about, there simply is not enough gold there for their digestive systems, and they've seemed to have adapted to eating iron ore, onyx, and other minerals. As a result, their hide changed and became a mottled colour with dull red and blue streaks. These hides only fetch about 7,500 to 10,000 gold pieces. It's still a lot, but it's only about half that of a regular Aurumvorax, but they're just as hard to kill. Their hide and, well, their special alloy claws are usually bright green, worth about 100 gold, or very rarely you can get a deep purple, worth 10 times as much. These pelts would not be very suitable for a traditional dwarven wedding gift, but can be turned into pretty spectacular hide armour, particularly amongst the Uthgard, and I've been told that this hide, thanks to the Cormanthor Aurumvorax's variable diet, can confer additional tolerance for different types of damage, particularly acid. Speaking of acid, don't stand anywhere near the front of one of these beasts if they happen to sneeze, as their corrosive saliva will strip the meat right off your bones. Please hit the like button if you made it this far, subscribe if you like what I do, check out my Subscribe Star or Patreon links for all the full scripts for these videos, buy some Teespring merchandise, wear your geek with pride. And as always, thanks for listening, and I'll be back with more for you very soon.